Statutorily, the trailer bill proposals are due to you in the legislature on February 1st, and so
We'll see it around February 1st.
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions before we conclude? I want to thank both Mr. Cohen and Mr. Taylor for taking time today, sharing their expertise, offering counsel. Senator Wright.
I'm sorry.
Is this on solar power?
Negative. I'll save that one for later. But
Okay.
one of the concerns that I have when I'm looking at the proposal for education, it has always been, I guess, the thing that we beat up on vocational education. And in this budget, again, I'm looking at an elimination of a big part. I would submit to you again that in many instances there are a lot of people who aren't going to go to college. There are probably some people who went who shouldn't have gone, but be that as it may. When I go to Trade Tech College in LA, over a third of the students have a bachelor's degree, but they're taking a vocational program at Trade Tech. It would have been cheaper for them to have gone to Trade Tech first and saved that money if that was what they really wanted to do in the first place. That's one of the few things that we do in education that actually gets people ready to go to work. In the discussions that we've had, we were talking about construction or all the other things that we're going to do, yet we're not training the workforce to do those jobs in particular. And now we're eliminating that again, which if you happen to be one of the people who, for whatever reason, you're not going to college because either you don't want to go or the new GPA that you just created pretty much aces you from being able to qualify. Now that means that when you graduate from high school, the likelihood that you will have a skill when you leave is even less, which means that the value of even going to high school is reduced, which means that a lot of people drop out because they realize that being there is almost a waste of time if they're not going to college and they're not going to learn how to do anything with which they could go out and make a living. They'd rather just go out and start training on their own to make a living. I would just put in a plug for the maintenance as much as we can, that it is just as important that since over 70% of our students aren't going to college, that we don't advance a policy that effectively disenfranchises the majority of the students who attend school.
I think, start by disagreeing with your basic premise that we're sort of targeting vocational education for cuts. By consolidating all of our categorical programs, we're basically acknowledging that a school district in your district is much better able to figure out how much vocational education to offer versus how much college prep to offer than we are in Sacramento. And so by giving all the dollars out on a flexible basis, we're encouraging local school districts to sort of retake decision-making and figure out what the weight is between traditional education, vocational education, other types of coursework. So I would argue that sitting here at this table, I am not an expert in what local districts and what classes should be offered, and so that's sort of the underlying basis of the flexibility proposal. Is to
I won't prolong the meeting, and we can have the discussion later, and we'll do it certainly in the education subcommittee. But the problem is that the categorical programs that you're consolidating, and I agree with much of that, those things had specific tasks that were assigned to them. But the spread between vocational and A through G isn't as much in the categorical sense, and much of the school's funding and the trigger cuts, not the parent trigger rather, many of those things are in fact based on A through G, and that's not being eliminated by the categorical revisions that you're making. So it may not be an intentional assault on vocational ed, but the school district really doesn't have that option because vocational versus A through G is not a part of the categorical choice that the school district can make. So I would disagree that, in fact, yes, you are attacking vocational ed if you take away this $514,000 and the other things that take away from it. I would like to see there be a greater recognition that, again, that over 70% of the kids might fare better in a program that actually provided them a job. Our current system, not all your fault, it goes back a number of years, actually disenfranchises the majority of the students who attend public school. My own view, it's a scary notion. I do appreciate the changes in the funding for private post-secondary schools. I started that with the chair. Last year we did that. We need to expand that again. In my neighborhood, every other TV commercial that comes on during the day is an advertisement to say that since your public school system ain't going to give you vocational ed, you can go to one of these private post-secondary schools and get ripped off. You ain't going to learn nothing, but you'll be in debt up to your eyeballs, and it's a non-bypassable debt. You can't file bankruptcy on it. They'll take the ring off your finger in a coffin when you're dead if you still owe money on one of those private post-secondary student loans.
Senator Wright, in fact, the administration does actually take what we've done a little bit further. But again, you're right. We'll continue this in the subcommittee. All right. Thank you all again. We want to ask if there's any. We'll see you February 16th. Any public comment before we adjourn? Please step forward. Can we see a raise of hands of how many people want to speak? Public comment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Please step forward. If you can keep your comments to a brief minute or so, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Scott Moore. I'm with Preschool California, and would just want to voice our opinion that we do not want to see this very difficult budget situation balanced off the backs of our youngest kids, our most vulnerable children. To follow up on Senator Simitian's comments around transitional kindergarten, there's a debate over whether or not there are any savings. What wasn't debated was whether or not we would be stripping the right of these 125,000 children to attend school. Everyone agrees this proposal would do that. And so you've got 40,000 children and their parents who are wondering, are we going to go to school next year or not? And we voice strong opposition to that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for being here to voice that concern.
Good afternoon, Katie Valenzuela with Public Advocates, here to make some quick comments specific around the K-12 education proposal. First, to state our concerns around the governor's initiative. We don't think it's going to help education as advertised. In fact, we think it will permanently remove the $2 billion taken in our current budget year, and it won't raise sufficient revenues to both pay off the debt and reach adequacy in our service provision that we've lost in the last few years. But that said, we are really excited about several other components of his proposal. We think it has the potential to right very historic wrongs in our current finance system. And we have 3 key amendments that I will cover very quickly, because we are worried that without these amendments we might actually make things worse for some kids in California. First, the money must follow the students to the schools, not to the district level. Second, that money that is generated by the students through this weighted student funding formula must be spent on those low-income and English learner students. And finally, that this new accountability system, which we're actually really excited to discuss, must be robust enough to actually ensure that students in California are receiving an effective delivery of the standards-based education that they're guaranteed under the state constitution. We really look forward to working with you on these amendments. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Carolyn Jenna with the California Medical Association. I'd like to start off by thanking Mr. Chair for all your comments in the last couple of days about the significant health and human services cuts that have been made and proposed in this budget and then in the last couple of budgets. Because I just want to make the point that to California's physicians, it's pretty clear what this budget is, and at least for the health and human services portion, it uses proposed budgetary savings as a justification for a significant policy change, and that is a huge, huge expansion of managed care in our public programs, Medi-Cal, long-term care, IHSS. So while managed care isn't inherently bad in and of itself, California's physicians are extremely concerned about making sure that we do this the right way, that we ensure continuity of care, and we need to really remember what managed care is. We're putting another player in the game between providers and their patients, as well as the state, and they need to be paid, which is justified, and all in the name of saving money. So we really need to make sure that this is done, whether it's the expansion of managed care into those 28 rural counties that don't currently have it, whether it's the mandate that all dual eligibles go into managed care, whether it's doing all long-term care services through managed care. We really need to make sure that this is done the right way and that we are not hurting patients and limiting their providers and their physicians' ability to provide them with the medical care that they need. We are very committed to working with the committee, with Department of Healthcare Services, Department of Managed Care, on the various fundamental changes that are proposed in the budget. We do have very big concerns about the Healthy Families elimination, but again, stand ready to work with you on those as we move forward.
We hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Senators. Joshua Golka with the California School Employees Association. We're in opposition of the elimination of school transportation funding. We also have concerns about the proposals to both consolidate categorical programs as well as the proposed trigger cuts that the governor's office has put forward. We look forward to working with you on all of these issues as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Steve Rhodes with the School Transportation Coalition, and we are also in opposition to the elimination of school finance. School transportation, and it's an urban, it's a rural issue, and it primarily hurts poor kids.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Michael Hulsizer here today on behalf of the California County Superintendents. We share the concern about the elimination of all transportation funding. That cut will have a very disequalizing impact on 1,000 school districts in the state, about 20% of them. That cut of about $490 million actually is the equivalent of a $2 billion revenue limit cut to them because they're just so unequally affected. We think it will push many school districts over the edge, and at a time when we're cutting, we think the principle of cutting equally among all school districts and maximizing flexibility is really what the legislature and governor ought to be doing, not targeting a cut on a very small percentage of school districts that impact a small percentage of students.
Thank you. Any other public comment? If not, colleagues, thank you for your presence, for your attention. We are adjourned.